the county's training for municipal clerks, chief inspectors, and poll workers. Excuse my cough, I got that going on. My name is Kara Skarlupka. I am the Shawano County Clerk. I have two deputies who are upstairs right now. Erica Davo and Charlene Milovitz both work in the office with the elections and everything. We're going to do this in 3 parts. The first hour, second hour, and then the third hour is more so for clerks and other duties that they have outside of the election cycle. More than welcome to stay and listen to that if you want to. It's totally up to you, but we should be done about 2 for the first couple sessions. All right, the topics for this first hour are going to be providing election results to the county clerk, poll book management, inspector statements, tally sheets, absentee ballots, remaking ballots, voter registration, counting votes, voter registration, postcards, and some general topics. So we're going to start off with the verifying and providing results to the county clerk. This will happen after 8 o'clock. You're going to print your results tapes off your machines or tally up your hand counts. The total number of voters in each poll book will be done. Verifying voting machine totals match that the voters listed in the poll book. And count and verify absentee ballot envelopes. Complete the poll book certification, inspector statement. Seal all of the ballots in your red ballot bag and make sure that that zip tie is pulled tight. And then place all of your media cards, keys inside the blue lanyard, and that blue lanyard then needs to be locked or sealed into the green media bag. Very important that that all goes in there before it comes back into the county. And then that you have all that done, you'll need to call your results into the county clerk office. We're going to start off with poll book management, which is that the certification bag, a page on the front of your poll books. The thing that we see the most common error is that this section right here is incorrect. That the last number voter is usually the, I got too close to it.
It's on the top. Your arrow.
I don't see my.
Your arrow on the top. Arrow. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna get that close anymore. That the last voter number is 822 that shows here, that is actually your number of registered voters. We see that number copied into this other voter number a lot. Make sure you have an odd number of poll workers or inspection workers sign this sheet. We'll get into why in a few minutes. Also in poll book management, there's watermarks in the poll books now. You've probably seen it's been out there for a couple, 2-3 years. And they are the absentee issued, absentee returned, and have you moved. Pretty self-explanatory. You'll see the absentee issued in there because that means that the ballot has been requested and the clerk has issued that ballot. And it made it into the state software system and into the poll book. Absentee return basically means the same thing, that your clerk got that ballot back prior to the election and it was entered into WisVote with a date. And have you moved? Have you moved is just a gentle nudge for the poll workers, for the voters coming through the line. If it's in here, you want to make sure that they're to ask them if they have moved into a different address, because the state got flagged by Social Security's DMV or your DOT, something happened where it put a flag on your record with WisVote, and and we need to verify if you've moved or not. If they moved across the street, same municipality, you need to have them register again. So that's basically what you're verifying, is if they're still at the same address. If the voter does not appear in the poll book, it's going to be they're a new voter, and that they'll either show up in the post supplemental or the supplemental, depending on when they actually registered. voter name and address or voter's name or address has changed, this requires that voter to register again. Do not change the poll book. If a gal got married, changed her name, she has to register again. And then it'll go back if it's on election day, she'll be in EDR and it'll be in the back of the poll book then. If she did it in the late registration period, it's in that supplemental in the back of the poll book. If there's an error in the poll book on a voter's name or address, and the error means a misspelling, if there's a W instead of an N, if there's one number off where you can determine that it was probably human error when that voter record was put in, that will go in the pink error sheet that we send out to everybody. You can change it in the poll book, but just cross it off and maybe red or something so we can see it. But if it's on the error sheet, we will see it. It does not constitute a new registration. If it's just an error, fix it, let us know, and we'll get it updated in WisVote. Oh, and a couple other things. The bathrooms are outside and around the corner. We are going to be taping this today so we can put it out on our website. So try to keep the background noise to a minimum. And there's one other thing. So with that, we'll move on to the incident log. We see incident logs come into our office totally blank. Totally blank. And that is not a good thing. We would like to at least see, if you had nothing going on that day, then we would like to at least see that your polls were open, at what time, and your polls were closed, at what time. That would be the least amount on here. If anything happens in your polling place during the day, and that could range from a dog getting into your polling place, came in through the open door, put that on there. It could be your jam machines should be on there. Just anything out of the ordinary, you should be putting on there. If you have an observer come in, put them on here and then write up your observer information. If you have a person that's unruly, put that on there. Just anything out of the ordinary, put it on this incident log so that we can all go back later at a later date if needed to find out actually what happened in your polling place.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, it's my understanding the incident log is an unusual activity. But before you went through all the unusual things, the dog eating my homework and everything else, you said if nothing happens, put in when the poll is open and when you close?
Yes.
What's unusual about that?
Nothing, but we would like to see that on there. If you opened at 8:01, that's unusual.
Okay.
Because you should be opening at 8. So just at least an open and a close. We want to see something on there
All right.
so that you know that sheet's in your office.
Okay.
So jumping into tally sheets, I was also going to mention the second hour we will go back over some of these items. So, if I go through them kind of fast, we'll be hitting on them again. This is actually a machine count tally sheet. And this is for, you take your number. I just need the total number off your machine. You don't have to tally up anything. It's just the number. This will most likely be filled in for whatever races we have going on. And then over here, we need an odd number of signatures. And then the date. I've been asked, why do we need an odd number of signatures? The reason why you need an odd number of signatures, and you should have your 3 people already set up who's going to be doing the certification of your election. It doesn't always go that all 3 people agree that this election, that they will certify the election as it was presented or ran through that day. Sometimes there's, that they don't agree. They didn't like what happened here. They don't agree with the write-in vote that was counted or not counted. So there could be some angst within the election workers that are going to be certifying that election. So you have an odd number of people because you will basically have a vote. You 3 people will be doing the certification. If 1 is against and 2 is for, that certification will stand. If you have 2 against and 1 is, you have 1 for, then you'll need to call me to find out what we're going to do because I'll have to call the state and we'll report it to them and then they'll give us guidance on how to go forward with an election that can't be certified at the municipal level. So it has happened. So don't think, oh, we're small, it's not going to happen. It could happen. So that is the reason why odd number of inspectors on the tally sheets and on some of the other forms that we'll be going through. There's one exception though. This is a hand count tally sheet. Some of you have seen this. Some of our municipalities still have hand count ballots, and that'll be in conjunction with, if they have the touch screen, they will have a hand count ballot. The other municipalities have paper ballots that go into the voting machine, the tabulator, and it looks like this. That's considered a paper ballot. State statute is that you have to have a paper ballot option. So that's why we have some paper ballots left out there. And therefore, those all have to be hand counted. And this is a tally sheet, hand count, same information over here. But in this area, you need to put in a hash mark. 5 hash marks for each section, even though it says 5, 10, 15, 20. You still got to put those hash marks in there. The state still looks for hash marks. So that is something that needs to be followed through. And then also on the tally sheets, you put your zero tapes and your results tapes. Absentee ballot request, I'm going to give you guys some backgrounds on what your clerk actually does so that you know what some of these processes are, so that if you were asked out in the community, you know, what is going on, how come this happens this way, you'd be able to help, you'd be able to answer some of those questions and then help out your clerk and, you know, have that process move a little bit more smoothly without saying, well, I only work the polls, I don't know. So just a little bit of background, and it's in everybody's handout. So for a clerk to receive an absentee ballot request, the voter must be active registered voter in your municipality, must provide a written request either by My Vote, which is the best way. If somebody says, how do I get an absentee ballot, push them towards myvote.wi.gov as the quickest way. It cuts out a lot of paperwork and time. But the other options are they can email the clerk and request an absentee ballot, or they can send in the EL 121, which is the actual application for an absentee ballot. With that, though, they must provide a photo ID with the requester, have a photo ID on file. And so if you do this every year for, April election and only that one, your clerk most likely has your ID on file. If not, then My Vote, you have to actually upload it to the website. And I know some people do have problems with doing that, so they can always go back to the email or fill out the form and send it in too. Because they will get that option. If they go out to My Vote and they want to do an absentee application and they don't complete the process, I believe they will be able to print off that application and then they can bring it into the clerk also with a photo ID or a copy of it. When the clerk sends out the ballot, they will also send absentee instructions on how to return the ballot, and it has to be mailed back to the clerk. It can't email it back or fax it back or anything like that. There's some different types of regular voter type requests are current election, means they only want to get for April, or they can do a calendar year, which would be for 24, or indefinitely confined, means that they have requested a ballot because they are disabled somehow and they want the ballot that way, and they will receive that indefinitely confined ballot until they take themselves off of that list or they pass away. Calendar year expires at the end of the year. If you are requesting for military or overseas voters, they can have their ballot emailed to them, but we still send the ballot certificate, and they still have to mail it back to the clerk, municipal clerk. So if there's that process not changed, it has to come back in the mail. Little background again on what your clerk does when she or he is trying to do the processing of these ballots. Once they get the application, they fill out this absentee ballot log, Excel spreadsheet, and it is their name, address, what type of ballot or voter they are, and then application information. So all of this needs to be filled in, and then ballot information, when the ballot was sent, when they receive it back. Return status, was it rejected or is it returned? Returned, not returned, rejected for reasons that we'll get into in a minute. And then on election day, if it was rejected, for, it was an overvote or crossover vote, then that would go in here, and then their voter number, their voter number for the day. So this is all stuff that they're doing prior to the election, working with those absentee ballots. So like I said, absentee ballots have to be returned by mail, or they can be dropped off directly to the clerk. However, you make an appointment, go in and see them, or they have office hours, you can go in and drop it off. You are not supposed to drop off anybody's ballot except for yours, unless the person you have in the past, the husband could bring in the husband and wife's absentee ballot and drop them off, and that was okay. Yes.
On the absentee ballots, when people vote for a person and then this person ends up in jail, does this vote still count for this person that's in jail?
So the question was, an absentee ballot went out to somebody and they end up incarcerated prior to the election. Does their vote still count? Does that ballot still get put into the process system? Yes, it does. They're innocent until proven guilty. And even at that, the way you can lose voting privileges is by committing a felony. And then the judge will revoke your voting privileges depending on what your felony is. So, and it can also be reinstated.
I got the person that they voted for.
Oh, the person that they voted for is now in jail? Yes. If their name is on the ballot, just like a deceased person, you have to, it's counted. Yep. So the exception to this rule is now, it has not always been this way in the past, a husband can bring in another person's ballot. Got to keep it down, we got the video going. A person can bring in another person's ballot, but you need to ask them some specific questions if it's on election day. And I know 2 of the 3, the guidelines, the clerks will have the guidelines. You need to ask that person if the person that they're bringing that ballot in for has specifically asked them to bring it in because of whatever reason makes them unable to bring it in. And then there is another question, but there's 2 or 3 specific questions you need to ask that person as delivering that ballot. They can't bring 10 in. I mean, it's like a 1 plus 1. At one time in election cycle within the last 4 years, the reason why this came up is that at one point in time they said you can only, the person that owns that ballot or has that ballot, they are the only one that can drop it off, and they can't drop off anything else. And in the same scenario, your employer cannot drop your ballot off either, for whatever reason that's in there.
And then I assume that would be documented on the incident report.
Yes, document that on the incident report that so-and-so dropped off another person's ballot, absentee ballot. So in-person voting happens 2 weeks prior to the election. They hold, all the clerks in the county will send me their hours and times, or whether it's their office hours or specific hours for in-person voting. That way, it says here, clerk needs to be available, but with those hours posted, they don't have to be available till that Friday at 5. If they say they're available till 3 o'clock on this Friday and it's posted, that is what they go by. The county does a type E notice for that, and it's person-to-person voting. Clerks can only provide ballots to voters by mail. That's not quite correct. And then clerks cannot accept applications for absentee ballots in person earlier than the 14 days. And that statement is because prior to 14 days, you can still do absentee ballots within that 14-day period. If you're coming in to give them an absentee application, they want you to vote right away, because otherwise you're mailing it out and you're there. I mean, what is the reason for taking it? And you can't take it home, they have to mail it. So that's kind of what those 2 lines are getting at. Voters must provide for in-person voting. They need to be registered, and then they need to provide that photo ID. So then the absentee ballot processing, I'm not going to go through this. I'm gonna just tell you how the town of Washington does it, because I'm a town of Washington clerk also. So the clerk receives the ballots in the mail, and then we log them all in. On election day, I take my ballots to the chief inspector and I hand them over to him or her, whoever's working that day. They will process those ballots throughout the day. By doing that, they take an absentee ballot and they announce to the two people doing the poll books. I have Jane Doe reads off their address, and they will check in the poll book, and either it's going to say absentee issued or maybe not, depending on the cutoff on the poll books. They will take a red pen. They will give that absentee ballot a voter number, and then we usually just zip them open and take the ballot out, and we have two piles, ballots and then envelopes. So the question comes up, when is an absentee ballot actually counted? So from the guidance that we have received from WEC, an absentee ballot is counted once that result tape after 8 o'clock has been printed. Then those ballots in that machine have been counted. Prior to 8 o'clock, they've been processed. They've been processed but not counted. So you can process your absentee ballots throughout the day. And then at 8 o'clock, you should have them all in there. If you don't, you'll have to keep going until you process them all. And then you run your results tape at the end of the night. And that's when all those ballots, whether they were absentee or not, are counted. So if you remember past elections, there was going back and forth that you can't do anything with absentee ballots until after 8 o'clock.
Right.
But it's Shawano County, we process them up till 8 o'clock. After 8 o'clock, then they are counted, because that's when the results tapes are processed or printed. So. Remaking ballots. This is for overvoted and cross-voted ballots. Some of us have machines that are not going to allow us to do that, allow the voter to do that, which is good. If you have hand count and you're doing your tally sheets at the end of the night, you see somebody else crossed over and voted. If you can tell the intent of the voter, you can remake the ballot and record the incident in detail on the inspector's statement. Or actually, when the voter is present, voted absentee ballots. So, and we will have this in April, partisan primary. So to remake that ballot, if somebody has made a mistake on theirs and they wanted another one, a second one, they get three ballots, up to three. On the bottom of every ballot has this information. So you take the original ballot, I would do a little rip in the top, and then, for your reason, and this is asking for a serial number, and that serial number is going to be what your municipality decides it is. It should be noted on the inspector's statement, and most people will number their incidences on the inspector's statement. So if it's number 10 on the inspector's statement, I'd put this as serial number is 10. So then when you give them a new ballot to do a second ballot or third, again, that 10 will come in here, and make sure it's the inspector's initial this corner down here, and actually they need to fill in this official use area right here if you're remaking a ballot or somebody spoiled a ballot and they need a new one. Okay, so counting write-in votes. I have a few slides on this. We're not going to get too in-depth on it because the scenarios for counting write-in votes are, we could go on, we could have class on counting write-in votes. There's a manual, WEC has a manual. And what I've been telling the participants is that we will know at the county clerk's office whether or not you're going to have to count your write-in votes or not. And we'll know the situation that you're in because of that. So we're going to work one-on-one with the municipalities that has to have that done, rather than having you guys trying to figure this out and then you don't need it for a year, and then next year we're back at it again. But some of the points here, the principles of counting the write-in ballots, is that if the number of ballot candidates for a given office is equal to or greater than the number of seats to be filled, only votes for registered write-in candidates are eligible for counting. So if you have two people on the, vote for one, you have two candidates, only a registered write-in will be counted. If somebody writes in somebody else's name, you don't count them. But then, if there are fewer ballot candidates for a given office than the number of seats to be filled, all write-in votes are eligible for counting, whether they're registered or not. The step up that a registered write-in has in the second principle is that when a voter comes in through the poll line and they need to specifically ask you for the list of registered voters, if there's a list of registered voters, you show them that list and then they go on and they vote. You don't give them the list, or anything like that. You show it to them and then they move on. It's not posted anywhere. It is by request of the voter to see that registered voter list.
Write-in voter.
Write-in voter, yes, write-in voter. Write-in candidate. So then, if there are any ballot candidates for a given office and one or more has passed away, all write-in votes are eligible for counting. So if there are any ballot candidates, if there are any ballot candidates for a given office and one or more has passed away, all write-ins count. So there's your next roll.
Even the Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck ones?
So Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Santa Claus, Batman, all of those are, unless you know that somebody in your township is actually Mickey Mouse, that's what they go by, you have the authority to not count those. That would be the scattering, if you want to even put it on there. Some elections, we don't even ask you for your scattering of those type of names because it doesn't matter. But to go through and write down all of those Mickey Mouse, Santa Claus on your tally sheet, it's not going to make a difference. Plus the fact that you know that if they were by some instance to win, they're not a registered, they're not registered. They may not even, how you got to verify you live in the municipality. There's some other things prior to the oath of office that has to happen for that person to, for that fictional person to actually make it onto the board or anywhere. Let's see, if there are enough write-in votes to fill the number of seats up for the election, regardless of eligibility of the write-in votes, votes for the ballot candidates may not be considered. So if there are enough write-in votes to fill the number of seats up for election, regardless of eligibility of the write-in votes. You gotta think about this now. Votes for the ballot candidates may not be considered. So you have an instance where, and there's a couple scenarios on here next, that you have ballot candidates, but you don't have enough. You have a vote for 3, you have 2 ballot candidates, and 3 write-ins, some are 1 and 3. Write-in candidates will take precedence over your actual candidates on the ballot, and we'll see that in a minute. So the first example is vote for not more than 2. You have 2 ballot candidates in a 2-seat race. Rusty is a registered write-in. So this person just voted for 3 people. You only need 2. So you might think Rusty's going to get the axe, but actually not. For the ballot instructions, we're just going to go to the answer. There were 3 votes marked. The write-in for Rusty Pike is the only one counted for this office. Record Rusty's vote on the tally sheet. And you have to do this because the machine is counting these guys. And it's going to go to 0 and 0. The voting machine has recorded this office as overvoted. So your results tape is going to say overvoted. And with the upcoming elections, they'll look more and more at overvotes and see why that happened. So you might have to go through your ballots and find the ballot that was overvoted, that type of thing. Then record the adjustment on the inspector statement. Adjust the tape, and no votes were recorded by the machine, or no votes were recorded, oh, no votes were recorded by the machine, that's why you have to add one in for Rusty Pipe. Sorry about that. Let's see. The second one is vote for no more than 2 and 1 ballot candidates for a 2-seat office. And Izzy is a registered write-in, Margie is not. And our Ida has actually got her circle marked. The votes for the 2 write-in candidates are counted for this office. So these 2 are counted. Record the write-in votes on the tally sheet because the machine isn't gonna see them because the circles are not filled in. But those write-in votes will supersede that ballot candidate. The voting machine has recorded a vote for Ida, but Ida shouldn't get that vote because the 2 write-ins are gonna supersede that. Inspectors subtract a vote from Ida's total and add the 2 write-ins. Record the adjustment on inspector's statement, yes.
So why would a write-in get preference over a candidate?
I think the state feels, or the state statute feels, that if somebody took the time to actually write somebody's name in, whether or not they filled in that circle, that's gonna take precedence over a ballot candidate.
Really?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Otherwise, you'd have to throw the whole thing out, right?
Right, because they voted for 3.
So these are registered write-ins?
No.
Izzy was, Margie is not, so it doesn't matter whether they're registered or not. And it has to do with vote for not more than 2, and there's only 1 ballot candidate. If there's 2 ballot candidates, we'd have a different scenario. I think the last one. So like I said, don't get too hung up on all of this because one thing is gonna throw it off, whether it's a vote for 1, vote for 2, vote for 3, and then how many people ran versus registered vote. I mean, it's endless. So we had this discussion in the last training for deceased. This is a vote for not more than 3. And there are 4 ballot candidates. Bill Melater is deceased prior to the election. Fanny is a registered write-in candidate. Haywood is not. So only the votes for the 2 write-in candidates are counted for this office. Fanny and Hayward, and it doesn't matter. One is registered, one is not. Record the write-in votes on a tally sheet. The voter is entitled to 1 more vote, but 2 ballot candidates have been marked. They really mess this one up. No ballot candidates may be counted because of that. So you counted your write-ins first, you're up to 2, you only need 1 more, and they voted for 2, so neither one of them are gonna count. The voting equipment has recorded 1 vote each for ballot candidates, Wanda and Bill, and 1 write-in. But they're not the right count. Because it doesn't matter that they didn't fill the circles in or not. That's why you're pulling out all of those ballots that have write-in candidates on them if you're using the tabulator. Yes,
So
ma'am.
at the end of the night, we're required to go through all the write-ins and make sure they're not.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Yes, whether it's on that roll of tape or if it's an actual ballot that's going through the tabulator, you're required by state statute to do that. That's the guidance that WEC has given. It's up to your chief inspector and your poll workers on what you're actually doing. Yes?
Okay, do we have to put all of this on the inspector's statement?
If you have a scenario like this, I definitely would. Because once it hits my office, we're going to be trying to figure out the same thing that you just figured out, and you figured it out, and we won't have a clue. So yeah, it's very helpful to put that type of stuff on the inspector statement. Oh, and if Bill won, he would get the position. And what will happen then is since Bill won, he's deceased, he won't be able to sign his oath of office or receive his candidacy form, therefore not accepting the position, therefore leaving your township with an open vacant position that the board will have to fill at a later date, like a hiring process, so. So counting votes, write-in votes, general information. I like to bring up Dean Martin Newbert on this one, simply because it is the if voter intent can be reasonably determined. So even though Dean Martin Newbert signed his declaration of candidacy papers as Dean Martin Newbert, that is not necessarily the way it gets counted. It doesn't have to be counted that way. You can be misspellings, abbreviations, only a last name is written in, unless you have two Newberts running, then you'd have to make a little bit more clear distinction on that. But if it's just Newbert, you can count that. If Newbert is spelled UE instead of EU, you count that. If it's Dean Martin, because that's what they remember, because it's, Dean Martin. If Dean Martin is on there and your municipality is in agreement that Dean Martin is a viable write-in for Dean Martin Newbert, you can count that. So it does not need to be exactly the way it was on his declaration of candidacy. So, if the voter did not mark an X or fill in a square or oval next to the write-in line, I think we determined that it's not absolutely necessary. You don't have to do that. A little bit, a scenario says what happens if you get an absentee ballot and it's circled. Whole name is circled instead of marking the little thing on the left. That is a viable ballot. Your chief inspector or one of the poll workers will need to remake that ballot though, so it'll go through the machine. Unless it's a hand count, then just count it. But then you do that process for spoiling and doing a new ballot for that person. One more thing. Do not count write-in votes when the voter intent cannot be reasonably determined. The voter has overvoted. They voted Democrat and they voted Republican in April. There's no way for you to determine what that voter's intent is, so the whole ballot gets set aside, rejected. On that ballot, there will be county board supervisors, there will be your villages, there will be school boards, sanitary lake districts if you have one. So all of those races below the presidential will not get counted. So it's imperative that when your people are coming through the line, well, it's going to be absentee ballots more so, because if they do that on their ballot and they try to put it in the machine's going to kick it out. So let's get it a little bit more fail-safe.
Doesn't
Yes.
that last line contradict what we just had?
Voter has overvoted.
Where they had the two candidates and the
It's more.
two
Well, I
candidates and a
guess I
write-in,
call it
and
a
then they said the
crossover.
write-in counts first before the candidate.
Well, so let's just say there's no write-ins, and it's a vote for one person, and there's two ballot candidates. If they voted for both those candidates, that would be considered overvoted. And your machine's gonna kick it out. So it's more so for the hand count you have to determine, and then your absentee. If that's the only race they voted for, was that one race, you have no idea what they were going for. So it's, it takes a little bit of care when you're doing those absentee ballots. Voter registration. For August and November, I would recommend that you have one person specifically doing registrations throughout the day. I plan on ordering 150% ballots off of your registered number of voters. So what that means, if you have 1,000 registered voters in your municipality, I'm ordering 1,500 ballots for you. What does that mean to you? If you use all those ballots, you will have 500 people doing election day registrations. And they're telling me I might be low on my 150% or 50% or whatever, 150. Yeah, I'm gonna do, just so you know, you don't wanna run out of ballots. So for April, it's gonna be 100% of your registered voters. August will be 125%, and then for November election, I'm gonna order 150%, so. Registration. Everybody does pretty good on the top, till we get down to the bottom. We need this information in order to put this voter's information into the state software system. Sometimes we don't see the official signature. We need to know if it was submitted by mail. We need to know the type of proof of residency used. And this is a pretty good, they have quite a few of the top choices that, paycheck, government a utility bill, Wisconsin ID, driver's license. So circle one of those. Proof of residence, issuing entity, driver's license, Wisconsin DOT. Utility bill, SMU, Gresham Utilities, something like this. We need a name of the company. Proof of residence number. Take the last 4 numbers of that customer's bill number or whatever, or driver's license. If it's zeros, it's zeros. But put something in there. And then date it was received, election day, and then election day voter number. So, but yeah, this is very important. If we get a lot of them, this year, we will have to send them back out to the clerk. And the clerk is going to have to follow up with that voter before we can enter their registration and therefore their participation in that election. So if we have this all up front first, it's very helpful. Proof of residence for voter registration. A long list, which was a lot of that across that bottom. You can read through this on your own. You've probably all looked at it or done registrations before. I just seen yesterday they came out with a guide now, like 12-page guide on proof of residence and voter ID, photo ID, which will be going home to the clerks before the next election. This is a nice little chart. I believe you have this in your packet. It might be, I know it's in the PowerPoint, but it might be a bigger one. This side is proof of residence or proof of identification. These are the items you can use when you are registering to vote. These are the items you can use when you are coming to the polls to vote to show your proof of identity. It's one thing that does go one side to the other. They have a valid driver's license with their address. Perfect, all the way around. If they don't, then you got to start looking at what you can get. Certificate of registration hasn't been used a lot in the past years. It is becoming more prevalent. It's for the late registration period prior to an election. It's an EL 133. And what happens is somebody will come in to register with the clerk, and it can't make it into the poll book anymore because it's too late. What will happen, this should be filled out. The clerk will keep a copy, and then the clerk will also give the voter a copy so that when they come to the polls on Tuesday, they bring this piece of paper with them, and the poll workers who are sitting at the front line will have their stack, 1 or 10 or 50 or whatever it is, and then what it says is that person does not have to register that day because they just pre-registered, and they have the certificate of registration to show that. Just match them up, send them along. They will need to sign in the back of the poll book in the the handwritten area, but it saves on the registration time. Well, in clerks, you cannot get that off the WEC website. You'll have to get it from the county office, and I think I do send it out on email before the elections. So supplemental poll list. We have basically 3 poll lists. You have your poll list and with everybody, in all the registered voters in there. And then you'll have a pre-printed supplemental poll list. It contains the names of all voters who registered during registration period up until the poll list was printed. And if we mail out our poll list to some of the municipalities, we do it a week before so that you get it in time. And then, so anybody that voted in that late registration period a week before won't be in this one. And they'll have to be put into the handwritten poll list at the back. This one is usually just a couple pages, and it's stuck in the back of your poll list after all A through Z, then the pre-printed supplemental poll list, and then your handwritten ones are after that. I'm going to go through this. There's 4 different postcards that they send out. And this just, again, for your information, so you know what's happening with your clerks during the election cycle. The first one is Have You Moved card. Eric Movers, I got Eric, is electronic Registration Information Center. And what ERIC is that there's, I want to say probably about 25 of the states belong to ERIC. Wisconsin is one of them. And it's been a little controversial now because of sharing of information between the states. And I don't know how it's going to shake out in the end. But right now, as it stands, if somebody were to, I'm not sure if, I'm using Florida as an example. If somebody were to move from Wisconsin to Florida and they registered to vote there, Florida will send, send something to Wisconsin saying, hey, John Doe has now registered in Florida. He should come off your list. He's moved. The difference is somebody were to move, like, let's say Colorado, who is not, I don't know for sure, but is not in the ERIC consortium. It could possibly happen that they're in Colorado, they registered to vote in Colorado. Wisconsin has no idea. So they vote in Colorado, they request an absentee ballot from Wisconsin. We're never going to catch up to them because we don't know. There's just no checks and balances on that type of mover. So have you moved? Something happened with a transaction with the DOT, United States Postal Service, I think Social Security, some federal or state entity has you flagged with them, and so it has now flagged your record at the Wisconsin Election Commission, and they're sending this out. And if it makes it to that person at their home, great. If the clerk gets it back, because it's coming back to the, come back to maps. Oh, here, comes back to the clerk will know through that red flag up that maybe that person is not there anymore, and for them to check into it further to see if that person actually moved. Register to vote online. Eligible but unregistered. The WEC again is sending out postcards to people who are not registered but able to, not a felon, over the age of 18, and saying, hey, do you want to register to vote? Go to myvote.wi.com or gov and vote. So, and there's a lot of third-party groups that do this also. One of the things that the state is sending them to MyVote. The third parties are saying, hey, send this card back to your clerk, which they don't. 99.9% of the time, they send that card back with not the proper proof of residency. And then we got to follow up, and if they don't put phone number on, they think they're registered, they're not. So those third-party mailers are kind of, the information's on there. It says, in yellow, send in your proof of residency, but it gets overlooked all the time. For your maintenance card, if somebody, you have a voter who voted in an election, let's say 2020, and they have not voted since then. If you are inactive on your voter account for 4 years, the state will send out a card and say, hey, do you still want to be registered? If you still do, because you plan on voting in 24, because you only do presidentials, you should sign that and send it back to the clerk. If the clerk gets it back, it's going to be another flag that to check into that voter to see what's up with them. And I think maybe now that we have to actually enter these into the state, if we get them back. I know at one time the municipal clerk had the authority to remove and put on, but I think the state has taken that over and they take them off. Anybody hear anything like that? This is a verification postcard by mail. So this was an online registration, probably through MyVote, and they're going to send out a card to say, hey, we just seen you registered online. Is this really you? What they're doing is they're verifying that address to make sure that's correct. Because if the clerk gets it back and they just went online and, because it has the online registration, that there's something up with that one. So there's, and we'll do this one too. So EDR, Election Day registration. Every person that registers on Election Day will get a postcard within probably about 10 days after that election. If they get that, if the person gets the postcard, great. If I get that postcard back, not so much, because then that means that the address that they registered wrong with is incorrect. Why did that happen? So the clerk gets to follow up on that. So there are a lot of checks and balances here to try to follow up with people who are, have registered to vote, and to follow up and make sure that they are who they are. This page is just the Wisconsin Election Commission page of different, the calendar for new clerks, some training opportunities, and that type of thing. Any questions?